2 hours and 14 minutes. That's how long he stood there screaming at me in the conference room. I counted every single minute on that stupid chrome wall clock behind his head while 32 people watched. My colleagues, my team, even the intern who started Monday. All of them just staring. Nobody said a word when he slammed his hand on the table so hard my water glass tipped over. Nobody moved when he called me fundamentally incompetent and the biggest mistake in company history. The quarterly numbers were down 6.2% in my division, and apparently that meant I deserved a public execution. When he finally stopped, my silk blouse was soaked with sweat under my blazer. The silence felt like concrete hardening around me. And then I heard my own voice, steady as a surgeon's hand. "Anything else, sir?" He actually looked startled, like he expected me to cry, or quit, or both. "No," he finally said. "Just fix it." I nodded, gathered my papers, and walked out without rushing. 32 pairs of eyes burned into my back. I didn't brake until I got to my car in the underground parking garage. Then I screamed into my steering wheel until my throat felt like sandpaper. That was Tuesday, May 17th, the day I decided Damon Caldwell needed to lose everything. Sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm Melina Vega, 34, Senior Director of Market Analytics at a Fortune 500 financial services firm. Or I was, until 3 months ago. People who know me professionally would describe me as methodical, composed, the woman who triple-checks her work and comes to meetings with backup plans for her backup plans. My mother calls me intensely practical, which in Cuban mom language means boring. But here's something about practical people. We know how systems work. We see the gears turning. We understand cause and effect. Before I go deep into this, if you're really interested in knowing what happened next, could you please give this video a like? Also subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get notified when we upload new videos like these. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because trust me, what I'm about to share might be the most valuable lesson some of you ever learn about workplace justice. Let me tell you about Damon Caldwell, 46, Executive Vice President, Harvard MBA. The kind of man who has a yacht but doesn't actually like sailing. He just likes hosting parties where everyone has to take their shoes off before coming aboard. He'd been with the company for 17 years and had the CEO's complete trust. 5 years ago, he personally selected me for promotion to senior director, telling me I had potential beyond my experience. For 4 years, I excelled. My team consistently outperformed projections. I won internal awards. Clients requested me specifically for presentations. But something changed last year. Damon stopped acknowledging my successes, started nitpicking minor issues, excluded me from meetings I should have attended. I tried talking to him directly, professional, respectful conversations about my concerns. He'd nod, promise to look into it, then nothing would change. I started documenting everything, every email, every meeting, every report, just in case. Then came the Morton account, a massive potential client worth millions in annual revenue. Damon assigned it to my team, but with impossible deadlines. When I pointed this out, he smiled and said, "I thought you were exceptional, Melina. Prove me right." My team worked around the clock for 2 weeks. I didn't see my apartment except to shower and change clothes. We delivered a flawless presentation package, addressing every concern the client had raised in preliminary discussions. The morning of the presentation, Damon called me into his office. "There's been a change of plans," he said, not looking up from his computer. "Lyle's team will handle the Morton presentation." Lyle Donovan, the golden boy who'd been with the company less than a year, the one who played golf with Damon on weekends. "My team has been working on this for 2 weeks," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We've addressed all their concerns, built the models, and Lyle's team will use that excellent groundwork." Damon interrupted. "This isn't personal, Melina. Morton specifically requested a fresh perspective." I knew it was a lie. I'd spoken with Juliet Morton myself 3 days earlier to confirm some details. She was expecting me. "I'd like to at least attend the presentation," I said. Damon finally looked at me, his expression almost pitying. "That won't be necessary. Focus on your quarterly numbers." they're looking concerning. I left his office feeling sick because I knew what was happening. I'd seen it before with Anaya from legal, with Thomas from product development. Damon building people up, then systematically dismantling them when they became too successful, too visible, too much competition. Later that day, I learned that Lyle's presentation had gone brilliantly. Morton signed with us. Damon sent a company-wide email praising Lyle's innovative approach and exceptional client management. My team's name wasn't mentioned once. 2 weeks later came that Tuesday. The public humiliation. 2 hours and 14 minutes of calculated destruction. What Damon didn't know was that I'd been preparing. Not for that specific moment, but for something like it. Because practical people see patterns. That night, I didn't cry anymore. I made a pot of coffee and opened my laptop. I had 3 folders of evidence already compiled. First, documentation of all the times Damon had taken credit for women's and minorities' work over the past 5 years. Emails, meeting recordings where consent was given, presentation files with metadata showing original creators. Second, proof that Damon had manipulated data on 3 major accounts to make his personal performance look better while making other divisions, including mine, look worse. Third, and most damning, evidence that Damon had been quietly steering certain clients toward his brother-in-law's consulting firm, creating a significant conflict of interest that violated company policy and possibly federal regulations. But it wasn't enough. Damon was too protected, too valuable to the company. They might reprimand him, maybe even demote him, but they wouldn't remove him. And he would definitely destroy me in the process. I needed leverage that would make it impossible for the company to choose him over justice. So I made a new plan, a 3-phase plan that would take months to execute. It would require patience, perfect timing, and the willingness to risk everything. But when you've already lost your dignity in front of 32 colleagues, the risk calculation changes. Phase 1. I needed allies, carefully selected, strategically positioned people who had also suffered under Damon but still had credibility within the company. I started with Imani Rhodes, a brilliant analyst who'd been passed over for promotion twice despite having the best performance metrics in her division. Damon had once jokingly asked her in a meeting if her natural hair was a political statement. I invited her to coffee at a shop 10 blocks from the office. "I'm not here to complain about Damon," I told her after some small talk. "I'm here because I'm doing something about him, and I think you might want to be involved." She studied me for a long moment. "What exactly are you planning?" "Justice," I said, "but I need to know you're in before I share details." Imani sipped her coffee. "The Morton account wasn't the first time he's done this to you, was it?" "No, and you weren't the only one he's made jokes about." She nodded slowly. "I'm listening." Next was Thomas Chen from Finance, who'd compiled a report showing inconsistencies in expense allocations, a report Damon had buried. Then Sonia Martinez from Legal, who'd been silenced when she raised concerns about some of Damon's client arrangements. One by one, I built a small coalition, never meeting as a group, never communicating by company email or phone, using encrypted messaging apps and meeting in places without security cameras. Phase 2. We needed more evidence, the kind that couldn't be explained away. Sonia helped me understand exactly what legal lines Damon had crossed. Thomas showed me how to follow the money through the labyrinth of company accounts. Imani taught me how to build data models that would reveal the patterns of Damon's manipulations. For 3 weeks, I got to work at 6 in the morning and didn't leave until 8 at night. I performed my actual job perfectly. There was no chance I was giving Damon even the smallest excuse to come after me. But every free moment I had was spent building our case. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Damon's executive assistant, Zara, sent me a meeting invitation with just the location. The garage stairwell, B level. When I arrived, she was already there, looking nervous. "I don't have long," she said without preamble. "But you should know that Mr. Caldwell has been meeting with the CEO about restructuring your division. They're discussing eliminating your position entirely." My stomach dropped. "Why are you telling me this?" Her eyes hardened. 3 years ago, before I worked for Mr. Caldwell, I filed a sexual harassment complaint against him. It mysteriously disappeared from HR records. When I followed up, I was told continuing to spread rumors could impact my employment. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm not looking for sympathy, Zara said. I'm looking for consequences. I have access to Mr. Caldwell's calendar, emails, and files. I've been documenting things that seemed questionable. I don't know if it's useful, but she handed me a small USB drive. This is very useful, I said quietly, and very brave. She shook her head. It's self-preservation. I hear things. I know he's planning to replace me with someone younger. More visually appealing was the term he used to the CEO. That night, I reviewed the files Zara had provided. They contained exactly what we needed. Evidence of Damon deliberately manipulating financial reports to make certain divisions, including mine, look worse than they were, while inflating his own results. There were emails proving he'd diverted potential clients to his brother-in-law's firm in exchange for kickbacks. And most disturbing, a pattern of targeting employees, particularly women and minorities, who he viewed as threats. I was simultaneously vindicated and horrified. This man had systematically destroyed careers while the company looked the other way. We now had enough evidence to not just remove Damon, but to potentially trigger federal investigations into financial improprieties. But releasing it would create a scandal that would hurt hundreds of innocent employees. The company's stock would plummet, people would lose jobs, retirement accounts would be devastated. I needed a surgical strike, not a nuclear bomb. That's when I formulated Phase 3, the most dangerous part of the plan. I would need to convince the board of directors that removing Damon quietly was in their best interest. I would need irrefutable evidence presented in a way that gave them no choice but to act. And I would need to ensure Damon couldn't destroy me in the process. The annual board retreat was scheduled for the following month at a luxury resort in Arizona. Every senior executive would be there, including the CEO and Damon. I wasn't invited. My level wasn't high enough. But Sonia from legal would be attending to present on regulatory compliance. We spent the next 3 weeks preparing a presentation unlike any other. We compiled the evidence into clear, undeniable exhibits. Financial data, email trails, witness statements, everything meticulously documented and verified. We created a secure website where it could all be accessed with a password, ready to be projected on screen. Sonia would have exactly 7 minutes to present on her assigned topic before the lunch break. We rehearsed how she would smoothly transition from regulatory compliance to specific compliance concerns regarding one executive, without naming Damon until the evidence was on screen. The night before the retreat, I couldn't sleep. We had one shot at this. If it failed, we would all likely lose our jobs, possibly be blacklisted in the industry. Damon had powerful friends. At 4:37 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Sonia, her voice tight with panic. They've changed the schedule. I'm not presenting until tomorrow, and they've cut my time to 3 minutes. My mind raced. Could be coincidence. There's more, Sonia continued. Damon cornered me at the welcome reception. Said he was looking forward to discussing my future with the company. He knows something's happening, Melina. I closed my eyes, trying to think. Where's the CEO right now? Still at the reception, I think. Most people are heading to dinner soon. Is your presentation ready to go? Loaded on your laptop? Yes, but... Fine, Thomas. Tell him to create a distraction at dinner. Something big enough to clear the room, but not serious enough to end the event. Then get the CEO alone. Tell him you have urgent information he needs to see before tomorrow's sessions. Melina, I can't just... You can. We've come too far to back down now. Call me after. The next 3 hours were the longest of my life. I paced my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes. Finally, at 8:23 in the evening, Sonia called back. It worked, she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. Thomas spilled an entire tray of drinks on the governor's wife. While everyone was helping clean up, I got 5 minutes with the CEO, told him I had concerning information about financial improprieties that couldn't wait until tomorrow. And? He watched the first 2 minutes of the presentation and stopped me. Said we needed to take this to his suite immediately. Melina, He called an emergency closed session with 3 board members. They watched the whole thing. My heart hammered in my chest. What did they say? The CEO asked me to stay in Arizona an extra day, said they'd need to address this situation immediately. Then he thanked me for my courage in coming forward. I sat down hard on my couch. And Damon? No idea. He wasn't there. But the CEO's assistant was making calls as I left. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Sonia and a text that just said, "Check your email now." I scrambled for my laptop, my heart pounding. A message had just come in from the CEO's executive office requesting that I join an urgent video call at 9 o'clock sharp. The time? 8:43. I didn't even shower, just threw on a blouse, ran a brush through my hair, and logged in from my dining table. When the call connected, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The CEO, Gerald Manning, sat at the center of a conference table with 4 board members and the company's general counsel. "Ms. Vega," Gerald said, his face unreadable, "I appreciate you joining us on short notice." I nodded, trying to look calm while my insides were liquidating. "We've reviewed some troubling information regarding Damon Caldwell's conduct and business practices," Gerald continued. "Information that appears to have been gathered by you and several colleagues over a significant period of time. Is that correct?" I took a deep breath. No going back now. "Yes, sir. After experiencing a pattern of inappropriate behavior and witnessing potential financial misconduct, I felt obligated to document these issues." One of the board members leaned forward. "Why didn't you bring these concerns through proper channels? HR? Ethics hotline?" I looked directly at the camera. "With respect, sir, I did. Twice. Both complaints were dismissed without investigation. Additionally, Mr. Caldwell's former assistant filed a sexual harassment complaint that mysteriously disappeared from HR records." The room went silent. Gerald exchanged glances with the general counsel. "Miss Vega," Gerald finally said, "we're conducting an immediate investigation into all of these allegations. Mr. Caldwell has been placed on administrative leave pending the results. We'd like you to come to headquarters today to provide a complete statement." "Of course," I said, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "And Ms. Vega," Gerald added, "while we don't condone the method by which this information was gathered and presented, we do appreciate the courage it took to bring it forward. Please be assured there will be no retaliation against you or your colleagues." I almost laughed. No retaliation? After years of watching this company protect Damon while he destroyed careers? But I kept my face neutral. "Thank you, sir. I'll be there at whatever time works best." After the call ended, I sat at my dining table for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. They were investigating Damon. He was on leave. It seemed like a victory, but something felt wrong. Too easy. They were containing the situation, yes, but would there be real consequences? Or would they just give Damon a golden parachute, let him resign with dignity, maybe even help him land a similar position at another company where he could continue his behavior? That wasn't justice. That was damage control. My phone rang. Imani. "They just called me in for a statement," she said without preamble. "You?" "Same. Video call with the CEO and board. Damon's on leave." She was quiet for a moment. "You don't sound happy." "Because we both know how this usually ends. Confidential settlement. Non-disclosure agreements. He walks away rich while they bury everything." "So what's the alternative?" Imani asked. I closed my eyes. Phase 3B. "Melina, no. We agreed that was absolute last resort. It's too risky. Meet me at my place in an hour. Bring Thomas if you can. I'll call Sonia." Phase 3B was the nuclear option, the plan we'd created but hoped never to use. It would ensure Damon faced real consequences, but it could also blow back on all of us. By noon, my living room had become command central. Imani, Thomas, Sonia, and 2 others from our coalition were spread across my furniture, laptops open. "The company investigation will take weeks," I explained. "During that time, they'll be doing damage control, preparing statements, probably negotiating Damon's exit package. They'll want this to disappear as quietly as possible." "But the evidence is solid," Thomas argued. They can't just ignore financial improprieties. They can minimize them, Sonia countered. Attribute it to accounting errors or misunderstandings. I've seen it before. I nodded. Exactly. Which is why we need to ensure the investigation's findings become public, no matter what. You're talking about leaking confidential company information, Thomas said quietly. That could be career suicide. Maybe worse. Not if we do it right, I replied. We create a secure digital dead man switch. If Damon isn't fired for cause, if there's no public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, if they try to silence any of us with NDAs, the information automatically releases to financial regulators, key industry publications, and 3 specific business journalists who've covered corporate misconduct before. The room went silent as everyone considered the implications. We'd be risking everything, Imani finally said. We're already risking everything, I countered. At least this way, we ensure actual consequences. Slowly, one by one, they agreed. We spent the next 4 hours setting up the system, making sure it couldn't be traced back to any of us. The trigger would be simple. If Damon received any severance beyond his legal entitlement, or if he was allowed to resign rather than be terminated, or if the company didn't publicly acknowledge the misconduct, everything would automatically release. Then, we went to headquarters and gave our statements. Separately, each spending hours with investigators, HR representatives, and legal counsel. I provided all the evidence we'd gathered, minus the dead man's switch details. For the next 2 weeks, we waited, continued doing our jobs, pretended everything was normal while the investigation proceeded. Damon remained on leave, his office dark, his parking space empty. Then came a company-wide email from Gerald. After a thorough investigation, we have determined that Damon Caldwell engaged in behavior inconsistent with our values and policies. Mr. Caldwell is no longer with the company, effective immediately. We are committed to creating a workplace where all employees are treated with respect. The email continued with corporate speak about values and procedures, but the message was clear. Damon was gone. But there was no mention of financial misconduct, no acknowledgement of the careers he'd damaged, no apology to those he'd harassed and discriminated against. That afternoon, I was called to Gerald's office. He was alone, sitting behind his massive desk, looking tired. Ms. Vega, he said, gesturing to a chair. Please sit. I remained standing. I prefer to stand, thank you. He nodded, studying me. I wanted to personally inform you that Mr. Caldwell has been terminated without severance. The investigation confirmed many of the issues you raised. Many, but not all? I asked. Gerald's expression tightened. We found sufficient cause for termination. That's what matters. With respect, sir, it's not all that matters. What about the people whose careers he damaged? The financial misconduct? The harassment? Those matters are being addressed internally, Gerald said firmly. As for careers being damaged, including yours, I've personally reviewed recent performance evaluations and compensation decisions. Appropriate adjustments will be made. And the public accounting? Will the company acknowledge what actually happened? Gerald leaned forward. Ms. Vega, you've achieved what you wanted. Damon is gone, but dragging the company's reputation through the mud helps no one. It hurts shareholders, employees, clients. Is that what you want? I met his gaze steadily. What I want is accountability. Not just for Damon, but for the system that protected him for years while he hurt people. The system, Gerald repeated, his voice cooling. The same system that just terminated a senior executive based largely on evidence you gathered? The system that's not taking any action against you for how you gathered that evidence? The system that ignored formal complaints, that allowed HR records to disappear. That looked the other way for 17 years while Damon created a hostile work environment for anyone he saw as a threat, particularly women and minorities. Gerald was silent for a long moment. What exactly are you asking for, Ms. Vega? A public statement acknowledging the full scope of the misconduct, a formal apology to everyone affected, and a third-party audit of all promotion decisions, performance evaluations, and compensation adjustments made under Damon's influence over the past 5 years. That's completely unreasonable, Gerald said, color rising in his face. The legal and financial implications alone would be significant, I interrupted, but not as significant as what would happen if the full evidence became public. If regulators opened investigations into the financial improprieties, if class action attorneys got involved. His eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? It's reality, I said calmly. I'm not the only one with copies of the evidence, sir. 3 days later, the company issued a public statement far more detailed than anything I'd expected. It acknowledged systematic discrimination, harassment, and financial misconduct by a former executive. It announced the third-party audit I'd requested. It even included an apology to those whose careers and well-being were negatively impacted. The statement didn't name Damon, but industry insiders knew exactly who it referred to. His reputation was destroyed overnight. No golden parachute, no quiet transition to another company, no covering up what he'd done. 2 days after the statement, I got a call from a journalist at a major business publication asking for comment on the situation at your company. I declined, of course. But the story ran anyway, with anonymous sources describing Damon's behavior in detail. Then another publication ran a piece, then another. Within a week, Damon Caldwell became the poster child for toxic leadership and corporate accountability failures. His name became radioactive in the industry. No company would touch him. A month later, I was promoted to executive director with a significant raise. Gerald personally delivered the news, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. We both knew it wasn't just recognition of my abilities. It was insurance against potential lawsuits. But I took it anyway. Imani got her long overdue promotion too. Thomas was appointed to lead a new financial oversight committee. Sonia became head of a newly created ethics compliance team. Even Zara, Damon's former assistant, was offered a position with better pay and a clear advancement path. Justice, it seemed, had been served, but the victory felt hollow somehow, because the system hadn't changed itself. We had forced its hand. And the moment we let up pressure, it would revert to protecting people like Damon again. That's when I made my final decision. I accepted the promotion, the raise, the corner office. I smiled in meetings with Gerald and the board. I played the good soldier for exactly 6 months. And then I resigned. My resignation letter was simple. I was leaving to start a consulting firm specializing in workplace culture and corporate accountability. What I didn't mention was that Imani, Thomas, Sonia, and several others were joining me as partners. Or that our first clients would include 3 former employees who'd been forced out by Damon years earlier and were now C-suite executives at other companies. The day I cleaned out my office, Gerald came by. He leaned against my doorframe, watching me pack. You know, he said conversationally, I've been in business for 34 years, seen all kinds of people come and go, but I've never met anyone quite like you, Melina. I continued packing, not looking up. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, he said, surprising me. You could have just taken Damon down. Instead, you changed an entire company, forced us to confront issues we'd ignored for years. Now I did look up, and yet, when I leave today, you'll still be running that company essentially the same way. Gerald smiled slightly. Perhaps. Or perhaps you've left a mark deeper than you realize. The board has approved a complete restructuring of our reporting systems for misconduct. Anonymous, third-party managed. Even I won't be able to see who reports what until it's been properly investigated. That's unexpected, I admitted. You've made enemies, Melina, powerful ones. But you've made some admirers too. He straightened up. Your consulting firm. What's it called? Vega Partners. He nodded. Expect a call from our HR department in about a month. We'll be looking for outside expertise on implementing the new systems. With that, he walked away. I stood there, cardboard box in hand, feeling something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not just satisfaction at bringing down someone who deserved it, but actual hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. 2 years have passed since then. Vega Partners now has 27 employees and clients across 3 continents. We help companies identify and address toxic leadership before it becomes entrenched. We train executives on creating truly inclusive cultures. We design accountability systems that don't rely on individual courage to function. And Damon? Last I heard, he was trying to start a leadership coaching business out of his home. It's not going well. Turns out, when you Google his name, the first 3 pages of results are all about his misconduct and termination. Digital karma is forever. As for me, I sleep better now. The nightmares about those 2 hours and 14 minutes of public humiliation have mostly stopped. I still flinch sometimes when executives raise their voices in meetings, but I'm working on that. The company? They actually became a client 6 months ago. Gerald retired last year, and the new CEO is serious about cultural transformation. Sometimes change has to be forced, but once it starts, it can take on a life of its own. I want to be clear about something. What I did wasn't just personal revenge. It was accountability. It was refusing to let another generation of talented people be destroyed by toxic leadership. It was standing up not just for myself, but for Imani, for Thomas, for Zara, for everyone who'd been hurt by a system designed to protect people like Damon at the expense of people like us. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, document everything. Find allies. Know that you're not crazy for feeling mistreated. And most importantly, understand that systems can change, but rarely from within. Sometimes you have to walk away to make the biggest impact. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone struggling in a toxic workplace, someone being gaslighted by a powerful boss, share this video with them. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about workplace transformation and accountability, and leave a comment about your own experiences. Let others know they're not alone. Because that's how change really happens. One story, one witness, one act of courage at a time. I stood alone in that conference room for 2 hours and 14 minutes. But I'm not standing alone anymore. And neither are you. The room fell silent as Penny's hand shot up without hesitation. Her gaze never wavered from mine as she spoke the words that would change everything between us. I support the ban. Gianna needs to go. My chest tightened as I looked around the oval table. 12 faces, not a single ally among them. One by one, hands rose in agreement until a forest of arms stretched toward the ceiling panels. The project leader, Liam, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Well, that settles it. Unanimous vote. Gianna, effective immediately, you're removed from Project Sunrise. Please gather your personal items from the project room by end of day. I sat perfectly still, allowing the wave of humiliation to wash over me without revealing a single ripple on my surface. Years of competitive swimming had taught me to hold my breath through pain. 3 years on this project, nearly a decade at the company, all crumbling because of the woman I'd mentored, trained, and championed. I understand, I said, keeping my voice steady as I gathered my tablet and notepad. I assume my regular duties in financial operations remain unchanged? Liam nodded, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. Of course, this only affects your special assignment on Sunrise. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and addressed the room. Thank you all for the opportunity to work with you these past 3 years. As I turned to leave, Penny caught my eye and mouthed what looked like sorry. The fakeness of it made my stomach clench. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the hallway. The worst part wasn't losing my place on the team. It was realizing how thoroughly I'd misread our friendship. Just last month, we'd celebrated her birthday at my apartment. I'd gifted her those pearl earrings she'd admired in the shop window. She wore them today while voting me out. I walked calmly to the elevator, nodding at colleagues who had no idea what had just happened. Inside, I pressed the button for the 4th floor, financial operations, my real domain, where I'd worked 7 years before being invited to join the prestigious Sunrise project. The doors opened to reveal the familiar gray carpeting and rows of identical workstations. No floor-to-ceiling windows like the innovation floor. No sleek furnishings or espresso machine. Just the beating heart of the company where money flowed through digital arteries I helped design. I sat at my station and logged in. The system greeted me with its usual array of financial dashboards. Payroll, expense approvals, bonus allocations, budget forecasting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a dangerous thought formed. Penny had forgotten something critical. I still controlled her financial fate. Hey there, if you're feeling the tension in this story already, hit that like button. and subscribe to catch the next part. Comment below if you've ever had someone you trusted turn against you. Let me know if you're Team Gianna or Team Penny so far. Now, let's get back to how this all unfolded. My name is Gianna Torres. I'm 32, single, and known around the office for three things: my photographic memory with numbers, my collection of vintage brooches, and my unfailing loyalty. That last one just got shattered. I've always been the reliable one, the steady worker. Not flashy like Penny with her designer clothes and perfect hair, but dependable. The person who returns borrowed pens and remembers birthdays. The one who stays late to fix others' mistakes without taking credit. Finance was my sanctuary. I understood the language of numbers better than I understood people. That's why my invitation to join Project Sunrise 3 years ago had been so unexpected. The innovation team wanted someone who could translate creative ideas into viable financial models. "We need someone who can keep us grounded," Liam had explained during my interview. "Someone who can tell us when our reach exceeds our budget." I met Penny during my second week on the team. She'd transferred from the marketing department, bringing a splash of color to our meetings with her bold ideas and even bolder personality. While I calculated costs in the corner, she commanded the room with presentations that left everyone energized. We were opposites in almost every way. She took risks. I managed them. She dreamed big. I made those dreams financially possible. Somehow, we balanced each other perfectly. Our friendship grew organically through late nights, finalizing quarterly reports, and early mornings prepping for executive presentations. I'd bring coffee. She'd bring pastries. We developed a shorthand that made us twice as effective as any other partnership on the team. "We're the dream team," she'd say, bumping my shoulder with hers. When Penny struggled with the financial aspects of her proposals, I stayed after hours to coach her. When she needed extra funding for her experimental marketing approach, I reworked the budget to make it happen. When others questioned her qualifications, I vouched for her expertise. "You're too nice," my sister told me during our weekly calls. "People take advantage of nice." I dismissed her concerns. Penny and I were friends, real friends in the competitive corporate landscape where alliances shifted like sand. Or so I thought. The first sign came 6 weeks ago. Liam announced that Project Sunrise would be showcased at the International Innovation Summit in Tokyo. Only 3 team members would attend and present our 2-year labor to industry leaders and potential investors. The career implications were enormous. Promotions, recognition, networking opportunities with global executives. That same day, Penny canceled our standing lunch date. "Too busy prepping some materials," her text read. The second sign came when I noticed meeting invitations that excluded me. Small gatherings in the break room that dispersed when I approached. Whispered conversations that stopped when I rounded corners. Then, last week, I forgot my phone charger and returned to the office after hours. Voices drifted from the project room. Penny's distinct laugh rising above the others. "With Gianna gone, there's room for all 3 of us to go to Tokyo," she was saying. "Liam already thinks she's too controlling. We just need to build on that." I froze outside the door, my heart pounding painfully against my ribs. "What about her work?" someone asked. "She handles all the financial projections." "I've been watching how she does it," Penny replied confidently. "I can take over that part. Trust me, she's not as essential as she thinks." I slipped away unnoticed, the betrayal settling into my bones like winter cold. Now, sitting at my financial operations desk after being voted off the team, I opened my email and found what I expected. A message from Human Resources confirming my removal from Project Sunrise and reinstating my full-time status in financial operations. What Penny and the others didn't realize was that this position gave me oversight of all expense reports, including the international travel budgets. Every reimbursement request, every approval override, every signature exception, all pass through systems I helped design and maintain. I clicked through to the expense approval database and typed in Penny's employee ID. Her file opened, revealing a history of transactions that made my eyebrows rise. For someone so concerned about going to Tokyo, she'd already been spending company money quite freely. Dinner charges well above the allowed per diem, hotel room upgrades on business trips, first-class flight bumps justified with vague explanations. Small infractions individually, but together, they formed a pattern. A pattern made worse by the most serious violation of all. She'd been approving her own expenses using a system workaround I'd specifically warned her against. My phone buzzed with a text from Penny. "Nothing personal. Sometimes projects need different voices at different stages. Still, friends? I stared at the message as a plan began forming in my mind. Not revenge, justice. The line between them might be thin, but I knew exactly where to stand. I took a deep breath and began documenting everything I found. With each click, each screenshot, each spreadsheet entry, the path forward became clearer. The company had a zero-tolerance policy for financial impropriety. Everyone knew this, especially those of us who processed the paychecks. The question wasn't whether I would act, but when and how, and whether anyone would connect the inevitable consequences to the quiet woman from financial operations who always played by the rules. Until now. I closed my laptop at exactly 5 p.m. and headed to the project room to collect my belongings as instructed. The space felt different already. My absence anticipated and accommodated. My desk had been partially cleared, personal items pushed into a sad pile. As I placed my succulent plant and framed certification into a cardboard box, Penny walked in. She lingered by the door, twisting the pearl earring I'd given her. Gianna, I hope you understand. It wasn't personal. I continued packing, keeping my voice neutral. You said that in your text. The team just felt we needed a different energy for the final phase. You're so detail-oriented, and we need big-picture thinking for Tokyo. The mention of Tokyo sent a pulse of anger through me, but I carefully folded my cardigan and placed it in the box. I designed the financial models that make this project viable. And we appreciate that, but innovation requires risk. And you're always cautioning against risk. I looked up at her then. Risk and recklessness aren't the same thing, Penny. Something flickered across her face. Doubt, perhaps. But she quickly replaced it with a practiced expression of professional regret. You'll bounce back. You always do. Yes, I agreed, picking up my box. I always do. As I walked past her, she reached out to touch my arm. We're still friends, right? The question hung in the air between us, breathtaking in its audacity. I gave her a small smile that revealed nothing of my thoughts and continued toward the elevator. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights blink on as darkness fell. 11 floors below, people streamed from office buildings into subway entrances, their workdays finished. Mine had just taken a new direction. I opened my laptop and began a careful review of company policy regarding expense reports and financial approvals. Not that I needed to. I'd helped write many of these procedures, but thoroughness was my nature. By midnight, I had outlined the exact violations in Penny's expense history, the dual signature requirement she'd bypassed, the system exceptions she'd created, the pattern of gradually increasing liberties with company funds. The next morning, I arrived at the office 30 minutes early. The financial operations floor was quiet, only a few early birds typing at their stations. I logged into the system and began preparing my quarterly audit report, a routine responsibility that no one paid much attention to. This quarter's report would be different. At 9:15 a.m., my desk phone rang. It was Liam. Gianna, do you have a moment to discuss the transition of your sunrise responsibilities? Of course. Would you like me to come up to the project room? Actually, I'd prefer meeting in the third-floor conference room. Less awkward for everyone. Translation: he didn't want me back in the space where I'd been rejected. The small conference room felt claustrophobic compared to the airy project room. Liam sat across from me, tablet in hand, scrolling through what looked like a checklist. We'll need your input on the financial forecasting models before the Tokyo presentation, he said, not meeting my eyes. Penny has volunteered to take over that aspect, but she'll need your notes. Penny is handling the financial projections? I kept my voice even, though internally I was shocked. She barely understood the basics of our budget structure. She's been studying your methods. Says she's confident she can manage it. I see. And who will be going to Tokyo? Liam finally looked up. Myself, Penny, and Trent. Exactly as she'd planned in that after-hours meeting I'd overheard. I've prepared transition documents, I said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Everything is organized by project phase. The passwords are in the text file. He pocketed the drive with visible relief. Thank you for being professional about this, Gianna. I nodded and stood to leave. One more thing, he added. The team is having a preparation dinner tonight at Le Petit Bistro. Would you consider joining us? For closure? The invitation surprised me. Who suggested that? Penny, actually. She feels terrible about how things ended. A dinner. At an expensive restaurant known for its wine list. I could already predict the expense report that would follow. with its conveniently rounded numbers and vague justifications. "I'd be happy to join you," I said. The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind of place where table candles cast flattering shadows across faces and make everyone look mysterious. 7 team members had shown up, arranged around a long table with Liam at the head. Penny had saved me a seat beside her. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered as I sat down. Her breath smelled like her second martini. Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around Tokyo, hotel arrangements, presentation schedules, meeting agendas. I sat quietly, observing how Penny positioned herself as the financial expert, using terminology she'd learned from me. "The ROI projections are looking exceptional," she told Liam, who nodded appreciatively. "I've adjusted Gianna's models to reflect more aggressive growth potential." "What adjustments specifically?" I asked, cutting into my salmon. She blinked rapidly. "Just some parameter tweaks. Nothing structural. Parameters like the market volatility variables?" "Exactly," she said, looking relieved that I'd provided a reasonable answer. "Those aren't arbitrary numbers, Penny. They're based on 5-year historical data across 3 market cycles." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Liam cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could discuss the technical details another time? Tonight is about celebrating how far we've come." By dessert, they'd moved on to discussing which executive might attend their presentation. Names were dropped like coins into a fountain, each with a wish attached. When the check came, Liam reached for it, but Penny intercepted. "Company card?" she said with a wink, pulling out the sleek corporate credit card I knew was only authorized for client meetings, not internal team dinners. As we left the restaurant, Penny linked her arm through mine. "See? No hard feelings. We're bigger than office politics." I smiled. "Absolutely." The next morning, I arrived at work to find a meeting request from the chief financial officer. The subject line read simply, "Quarterly audit discussion." My pulse quickened. I'd submitted my report late last night, highlighting the pattern of expense report irregularities without naming specific employees. I'd merely noted that the system had logged multiple authorization exceptions that warranted review. The CFO, Helen, was known for her methodical approach to problems. She never rushed to judgment, but once she reached a conclusion, she was immovable. Her office was a glass-walled corner space that overlooked the river. I knocked on the doorframe at exactly 10 a.m. "Gianna, thank you for your thorough report," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk, particularly the section on expense approval exceptions. "Just following standard audit protocols." She studied me carefully. "This pattern emerged recently?" "The frequency has increased over the past 3 months," I replied. "But the first exceptions date back nearly 6 months." "I see." She tapped her pen against a printed copy of my report. "And you're confident in the data?" "Every exception is logged in the system, time-stamped and linked to user credentials." Helen nodded slowly. "I'll need to bring this to the attention of the executive committee. Financial integrity is foundational to our operation." As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a message from Penny. "Meeting with CFO this afternoon. Any idea what it's about?" A cold satisfaction settled in my chest. I didn't respond. By lunchtime, whispers circulated through the financial operations floor. 2 members of the security team had been seen entering the executive conference room. HR Director Natalie had canceled her external appointments for the afternoon. At 2:13 p.m., my phone lit up again. 7 messages from Penny in rapid succession. "Gianna, I need to talk to you as soon as possible. Something weird is happening. They're asking about expense reports. Did you say something? Please call me. They're looking at my corporate card charges. I need your help." I slipped my phone into my desk drawer and continued working on next quarter's budget projections. At 3:40 p.m., a commotion near the elevator caught everyone's attention. Penny stood there, face flushed, Security Chief Dale beside her. Her access badge hung limply in her hand. "I need to speak with Gianna," she said loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. I remained seated as she marched toward my desk, security following close behind. "What did you do?" she hissed, leaning over my workspace. "They're talking about expense fraud. They've suspended my access." I looked up calmly. I submitted my quarterly audit report, as required by my job description. "You targeted me." I highlighted system exceptions. The data spoke for itself. Dale stepped forward. "Miss Chen, we need to continue the exit process." Penny's eyes widened. "Exit process? I'm not being fired. This is a misunderstanding. Company policy requires immediate suspension pending investigation of financial impropriety," Dale explained. his voice low but firm. Please come with me to collect your personal belongings. As they led her away, she looked back at me, realization dawning on her face. This is because of yesterday, isn't it? You're ruining my career over a team vote? I didn't respond. Around me, colleagues pretended to work while watching the drama unfold. As the elevator doors closed on Penny's distressed face, my desk phone rang. It was Helen. Gianna, can you join the executive committee? We need someone who understands the financial systems to answer some questions. Of course, I replied. I'm on my way. The executive conference room was tense when I entered. 6 senior leaders sat around the table, faces grim. CEO Thomas gestured for me to take an empty chair. Gianna, thank you for your diligence in the audit process, he began. We need your expertise to understand exactly what happened here. For the next hour, I explained the expense approval system, the safeguards that had been bypassed, and the pattern of escalating violations. I was careful to remain factual and unemotional. And is this limited to one employee? Asked the legal director. The system logged exceptions from 3 user credentials, I answered truthfully. But one account showed significantly more activity than the others. As the meeting concluded, Thomas addressed me directly. The Tokyo presentation is in 10 days. Given these circumstances, we'll need to restructure the presentation team. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Since you're already familiar with the financial models, he continued, would you be willing to rejoin Project Sunrise and present that portion in Tokyo? The offer hung in the air, everything Penny had schemed for, now being handed to me, the perfect revenge served on a silver platter. But something felt hollow about it. May I have until tomorrow to consider? I asked, surprising myself as much as them. Thomas looked taken aback but nodded. Of course, let us know by noon. As I walked back to my desk, my phone buzzed once more. A message from a number I didn't recognize. This is Penny, using my personal phone. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park after work. Please, Gianna. There's something you don't know. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let Penny face the consequences of her actions without my interference. But curiosity won out. What could she possibly tell me that would change anything? Riverside Park was 4 blocks from our office building. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the walking paths as I approached our usual bench, the one where we'd shared countless lunch breaks before everything fell apart. Penny sat hunched over, still in her work clothes but missing her usual perfect posture. When she looked up, her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, and the pearl earrings were gone. You came, she said, sounding genuinely surprised. Thank you. I remained standing. What's this about? They're saying I could face criminal charges, Gianna. Criminal charges. Over expense reports. Her voice cracked. My career is over. The company has a zero-tolerance policy for financial impropriety. You knew that. It was just a few dinners, a couple of room upgrades. She ran a hand through her disheveled hair. Everyone does it. No, Penny, everyone doesn't. She looked away, watching a jogger pass on the nearby path. I need this job. My mother's medical bills. She trailed off. I'd heard about her mother's chronic illness. Penny had mentioned the treatments occasionally, usually when explaining why she needed extra shifts or overtime. You should have thought about that before bypassing approval protocols, I said, my voice softer than I intended. Is that why you did it? Revenge for the team vote? She looked up at me, her expression hardening. You waited until I was about to get everything I worked for, then pulled the rug out. I finally sat down beside her, maintaining distance. I submitted a routine audit report. The system flagged exceptions. That's my job. Don't pretend this wasn't calculated. She turned to face me fully. You could have warned me, given me a chance to fix it, like the warning you gave me before organizing the vote to remove me from the team. She had the decency to look away. That was different. How? You saw something you wanted, my spot on the Tokyo team, and you manipulated the situation to get it. You didn't worry about my career then. The team genuinely felt you were too controlling, she insisted. Too focused on limitations instead of possibilities. And yet now they need me to explain the financial models you claim to understand. Penny flinched. They offered you my spot, didn't they? I nodded. Are you taking it? I haven't decided. A silence fell between us, filled only by distant traffic sounds and birds settling in for evening. The park was emptying as office workers headed home, leaving us increasingly isolated on our bench. There's something you should know, Penny finally said, her voice quiet. I wasn't the only one breaking protocols. I raised an eyebrow. The system logged 2 other user credentials with exceptions, much fewer than yours. Do you know whose? I shook my head. I'd noted the exceptions, but hadn't investigated the specific users. Liam and Trent, she said, the other two Tokyo presenters. This wasn't entirely surprising. The three of them had been inseparable these past weeks, planning their Tokyo strategy and my removal. Liam suggested the workaround, she continued. Said it was faster than waiting for proper approvals when we were in a project crunch, he said. She hesitated. He said you did it sometimes too. I've never bypassed approval protocols, I said firmly. That's what I realized when they started questioning me today. You never taught me that shortcut. Liam did. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was learning insider knowledge. Turns out I was just being set up as the fall person. I processed this information carefully. What are you suggesting? Look into who approved Liam's exceptions, she said. I bet it wasn't him taking the risk. He's too smart for that. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I'd been so focused on Penny's betrayal that I hadn't looked deeper into the other exceptions. Why are you telling me this? Because despite what you think, I didn't orchestrate your removal, she said. I went along with it, yes. I wanted Tokyo, but the plan to push you out came from Liam. He's been working on it for months. Months? The timeline didn't make sense. Why would he wait so long? I've been on the team for 3 years. Penny looked at me directly. Because of the patent application. My breath caught. Project Sunrise had developed a revolutionary approach to sustainable energy distribution. The patent, once approved, would be worth millions. What about it? The original application listed you as co-inventor because of your financial modeling innovations, she explained. But the revised application submitted last month only lists Liam, Trent, and now me, with you off the team before the Tokyo presentation. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. It wasn't just about who went to Tokyo. It was about whose name appeared on a potentially lucrative patent. That's why they needed me gone before the presentation, I said slowly. The final patent approval happens right after. Penny nodded. I didn't know about the patent change until yesterday. I swear, Gianna. I thought we were just jockeying for presentation spots. I stood up abruptly. I need to go. What are you going to do? Penny called. As I started walking away, I turned back briefly. What I've always done. Follow the data. That night, I barely slept. I accessed the company systems remotely and dug deeper into the expense approval exceptions. Sure enough, Liam's exceptions had been approved by Trent, and Trent's by Liam, a clear violation of separation of duties. More concerning was what they'd been expensing, meetings with patent attorneys not on the company's approved vendor list. By morning, I had compiled a comprehensive report, not just on expense violations, but on the patent application changes. I outlined how my financial innovations had been critical to making the technology commercially viable, with timestamps showing my contributions predated both Trent's and Penny's involvement. At 11:45 a.m., I walked into Thomas's office. He looked up from his computer, surprised. Gianna, I wasn't expecting you until noon. I've made my decision about Tokyo, I said, placing a sealed envelope on his desk. And I've prepared some additional information you should review before finalizing the presentation team. He picked up the envelope. What's this about? Patent application irregularities and a concerning pattern of approval exceptions beyond what was covered in yesterday's meeting. His expression turned grave. Sit down. For the next hour, I walked him through my findings. The unauthorized patent attorney meetings. The removal of my name from the application. The coordinated effort to push me off the team before the Tokyo presentation where the technology would be unveiled. This is extremely serious, Thomas said when I finished. If what you're suggesting is true, we're talking about intellectual property theft, not just expense report violations. Every claim is supported by system data, I replied. Nothing I've presented is based on hearsay or personal grievance. He studied me for a moment. What do you want out of this, Gianna? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Recognition? I want what's fair, I finally said. My contributions acknowledged. The proper protocols followed. The company protected from potential legal issues down the road. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll need to bring in legal immediately, and the board will have to be informed. He paused. This could delay the Tokyo presentation. Better a delay than a disaster, I said. And Penny Chen's situation? I hesitated. Penny had betrayed me, no question, but she'd also given me the missing piece that exposed the larger scheme. Her expense violations are real, I said carefully, but I believe she was deliberately misled about protocol by Liam. That should be considered in any disciplinary decision. Thomas looked surprised. That's surprisingly generous. Given the circumstances, I shrugged. Data doesn't hold grudges, neither should decisions based on it. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of closed-door meetings, legal consultations, and system audits. I was called in repeatedly to explain financial models and timestamp evidence. By the third day, the company's response took shape with stunning swiftness. Liam and Trent were placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The patent application was amended to restore my name as co-inventor. The Tokyo presentation was postponed by 1 month to allow for strategic realignment, corporate speak for damage control. Most surprisingly, Penny was reinstated with a formal reprimand and mandatory ethics training. Her expense violations couldn't be ignored, but evidence supported her claim that she'd been misled about protocols by senior team members. On Friday afternoon, Thomas called me into the executive conference room. The full leadership team was present, along with 2 board members. "Gianna, thank you for your diligence in bringing these issues to our attention," Thomas began. "Your attention to detail and commitment to proper procedure potentially saved this company from significant legal complications." Murmurs of agreement circled the table. "We would like to offer you a new position," he continued. "Effective immediately, we're creating a compliance and innovation integrity division. We need someone who understands both the creative process and the importance of proper protocols. Someone who can ensure our intellectual property is properly protected and attributed." I blinked, processing the offer. "That sounds like a significant responsibility, with corresponding compensation and authority," the board chair added, "including oversight of all international presentations and patent applications." The irony wasn't lost on me. In attempting to push me aside, Liam and Trent had inadvertently elevated me to a position where I would now oversee their work, if they remained with the company after the investigation. "And Project Sunrise?" I asked. "You'll lead the Tokyo presentation," Thomas confirmed, "as the most senior remaining team member with complete understanding of both the technology and financial models." As the meeting concluded and I walked back to my desk, a notification appeared on my phone, an email from Penny. "Heard about your promotion. Well deserved. They're letting me stay on Sunrise but not go to Tokyo. Fair enough. I'm sorry for everything, Gianna. Not just getting caught, but for betraying your trust. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No expectations." I sat at my desk, contemplating how differently this had all turned out from what I'd initially imagined. My revenge hadn't been sending a single devastating email to destroy Penny. It had been following the systems and processes I'd always believed in, allowing the truth to emerge through verifiable data. The next morning as I walked into the building, Security Chief Dale nodded respectfully. "Morning, Director Torres." Director Torres. The new title still felt strange. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor. "On thy new work location." As I stepped out, I noticed the nameplate on the corner office being updated. The maintenance worker carefully placed the new sign. "Gianna Torres, Director, Compliance and Innovation, Integrity." Inside, a plant had been delivered with a card from the executive team. Beyond the glass walls, I could see the river winding through the city and the project room 8 floors below where I'd once been voted out. I opened my laptop and began organizing my first priority, a complete review of all pending patent applications. No one would ever again have their innovations stolen on my watch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building yourself into someone they can't ignore, someone whose very position embodies the principles they violated. Every time Liam or Trent or even Penny submitted work now, my approval would be required. Every innovation would pass through my hands for verification. The hand that had once been raised against me would now reach out for my signature. That's the thing about real power. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply becomes the system through which everything else must pass. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of workplace justice. Have you ever been underestimated, only to rise higher than anyone expected? Share your experience in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the people who try to write you out of the story end up giving you the pen.